At the family dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned over and whispered, "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman." I just laughed and said, "Don't worry, dear." A few weeks later, I gave her a surprise. The DNA test completely destroyed her. Imagine this, you're at a family dinner, the kind you've hosted 1,000 times. Then, your daughter-in-law leans in, her breath cold against your ear, and whispers a confession that shatters your entire world. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman." The audacity. I swear, a part of me died right there at the table, but another part. That part just laughed. Cedric and we'd been married 43 years. 43 years of shared everything, from quiet breakfasts to the comfortable silence that settles when two people know each other's souls. At 65, I thought I knew him, knew our son Judd, knew the solid life we'd built in our old colonial home. Turns out, I knew absolutely nothing. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. Our dining room glowed with the warm light from the chandeliers Cedric gave me for our 20th anniversary. My grandmother's china was out, the crystal glasses shimmering. It should have been perfect. Just a family dinner with our son, Judd, and his wife of 3 years, Lilia. Lilia sat opposite me, her blonde hair pulled back in that severe style she favored. Her green eyes, sharp and calculating, always seemed to be watching, studying people for weaknesses. She was 28, 15 years younger than Judd, and from the moment she walked into our family, I'd sensed something predatory about her. Tonight, she was practically radiating. Not with soft happiness, but with a hard, triumphant gleam. She kept touching her still flat stomach, drawing attention in that subtle way she perfected. Judd, bless his trusting heart, was completely oblivious. He'd always seen the best in everyone. He was focused on cutting his steak, his dark hair falling across his forehead, just like when he was a boy. And Cedric? My Cedric, at the head of the table, silver hair neat, his blue eyes, usually so warm when they met mine, were fixed on his plate. He hadn't looked at me directly all evening. In fact, he hadn't really looked at me in weeks. "Bessie, you've outdone yourself again," Judd exclaimed, gesturing at the roast I'd spent all afternoon on. "This is incredible." I smiled, but it felt glued on. A thick tension filled the air, making the food taste like ash. Something was brewing, I could feel it, like the stillness before a massive storm. "Mother Bessie is such a wonderful cook," Lilia purred, her voice sweet, but with an underlying edge only I seemed to catch. "Such a devoted wife and mother. It's inspiring, really." The way she drew out, devoted, sent a chill down my spine, but I just nodded politely. "Thank you, dear." Lilia dabbed her lips with a napkin, a small, knowing smile playing on her mouth. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about devotion lately. About marriage vows. For better or worse, in sickness and in health," her eyes glittered. "Through all kinds of challenges." Cedric's fork clinked against his plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "That's lovely, sweetheart," Judd said, reaching for Lilia's hand. "Marriage is about commitment, isn't it? Building something together." "Oh, yes," Lilia agreed, but her gaze was locked on mine. Building something, or sometimes, sharing what's already been built. My heart hammered. Why? I couldn't put my finger on it, but combined with Cedric's continued avoidance, alarm bells were ringing wildly in my head. "I have some news," Lilia announced suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. "News that will change everything for our family." Judd shot upright, his face alight with anticipation. "What is it?" Lilia stood gracefully, smoothing her dress. "I'm pregnant." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Judd's face absolutely transformed with joy. He sprang up, sweeping Lilia into a hug. "Lilia, that's wonderful." He turned to us, beaming. "Mom, Dad, you're going to be grandparents." I should have been overjoyed. I should have been crying happy tears, planning nursery colors. Instead, something cold and ugly twisted in my gut. Over Judd's shoulder, Lilia's eyes were locked on Cedric, and her expression was pure triumph. "Congratulations," I managed, my voice sounding foreign. But Lilia wasn't finished. As Judd released her to pour champagne, she slowly circled the table. She stopped beside my chair, leaning down as if for a hug. Instead, her lips brushed my ear, and she whispered words that would haunt my waking thoughts for weeks. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you old fool." The world tilted on its axis. My hands gripped the table edge, knuckles white. But somehow, impossibly, I laughed. A bright, clear sound that echoed through the dining room. "Don't worry, dear," I heard myself say, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside my chest. "Everything will work out just fine." Lilia recoiled, confusion clouding her face. She'd expected tears, accusations, drama. My calm response had completely thrown her. But as I looked across at Cedric, who still couldn't meet my eyes, I felt something essential die inside me. The last shred of trust, the final thread of certainty about the life I thought I'd built. Judd was still chattering, raising his glass, talking about new beginnings. His happiness was so pure, so genuine, it broke my heart all over again. How long had this been going on? How many layers of lies had I been living under? I raised my own glass with a steady hand, smiled at my son, and felt my world crumble into dust around me. The rest of dinner was a blur. I answered when spoken to, smiled on cue, played the part of the delighted mother-in-law. But inside, I was screaming. When they finally left, Judd still bubbling with excitement about cribs, Lilia gave me one last satisfied, knowing look. I stood in my kitchen, loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. Cedric appeared in the doorway, his shoulders slumped, looking utterly spent. "Bess," he started, his voice rough. "Not tonight," I said, not turning around. "I can't do this tonight." I heard him sigh, heard his footsteps retreat up the stairs to the bedroom we'd shared for over 40 years. But I couldn't follow him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, I stood alone, surrounded by the remnants of what had been my last innocent family dinner, and wondered how long I'd been living with strangers. Sleep didn't come. I lay in our king-sized bed, listening to Cedric's breathing, wondering if the man beside me was truly a stranger. Every creak of the house, every distant hum of the refrigerator, seemed deafening in the darkness. Morning arrived, and I moved through our usual routine like an actress in a play. Coffee for 2, eggs over easy, whole wheat toast cut diagonally for Cedric, just how he liked it. We sat across from each other, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, and I studied his face as if seeing it for the very first time. "Sleep well?" he asked, not looking up from his newspaper. "Fine," I lied. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. Finally, Cedric folded his paper. "I'll be working in the garden today. The roses need attention before the first frost." Working in the garden. How many times had I heard those exact words over the past few months? I watched him walk away, noticing a slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there a year ago. At 72, he was still handsome, distinguished, the way he'd been when he first charmed me at a church social 45 years ago. But now, I truly wondered if I had ever really known the man behind that familiar face. Later, alone with my cold coffee, my mind reeled, sifting through the last few months for clues I'd completely missed. And they were there, like scattered puzzle pieces I'd been too foolish to connect. 3 months ago, Cedric started showering at weird times, not just after working in the yard, but randomly before dinner. He'd say he didn't want to smell like fertilizer. 2 months ago, I found a credit card statement with charges I didn't recognize, a florist in the next town, a jewelry store. He'd claimed they were birthday surprises for me, even though my birthday was 4 months away. And I believed him. 6 weeks ago, Lilia started dropping by more often, always when Judd was at work. Always with some excuse about family recipes or marriage advice. She'd stay for hours. I'd often walk in on her and Cedric having hushed conversations that abruptly stopped. "Just talking about the garden," Cedric would say. "Lilia's interested in roses." But Lilia had never shown an ounce of interest in gardening. In fact, she'd once complained that dirt under her fingernails made her feel absolutely primitive. Now, in the harsh light of the morning after, those conversations took on a sinister new meaning. The way she'd touch his arm, her forced laughter, the way Cedric's cheeks would flush pink, a flush I hadn't seen in years. I'd told myself it was just harmless vanity, a man his age enjoying the attention of a young, beautiful woman. How incredibly naive I'd been. The phone rang, jolting me from my dark thoughts. It was Judd, his voice bright with excitement. "Mom, did you sleep at all last night?" I was too excited to close my eyes. "I'm still processing," I said carefully. "It's wonderful news, sweetheart. Lilia's already making lists, baby names, nursery themes, everything. She wants to start shopping this weekend." He paused. "She mentioned that Dad seemed really happy about the news. Said he got a little emotional when she told him." My hand tightened on the phone. "When did she tell him?" "Last week, I think. She wanted to share it with him first. Said she was nervous about how you'd both react." "Isn't that sweet?" "She was worried you might think we were too young." Last week. Lilia had told Cedric about the pregnancy a full week before she announced it to the family. Why? Unless. "Mom? You still there?" "Yes," I managed. "Just thinking about everything we'll need to do." After I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the phone. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with sickening clarity. The private conversation, Cedric's strange behavior, Lilia's triumphant expression at dinner. I desperately needed the truth. But I couldn't confront Cedric directly. Not yet. What if I was wrong? What if my suspicious mind was destroying my marriage over nothing? But what if I was right? I spent the rest of the morning in a fog, mechanically cleaning rooms already spotless, folding laundry that didn't need folding. Through the kitchen window, I watched Cedric prune his roses with careful, practiced movements. Marcus, our gardener, worked nearby, trimming hedges with his usual quiet efficiency. Marcus was a gentle soul, probably in his late 30s, with kind brown eyes and hands roughened by work. Cedric had hired him a year ago, and I'd grown fond of his polite manner. Now, I watched him, and I wondered if he knew. Had he seen things? Did the whole neighborhood know what was happening in my marriage before I did? Around noon, Lilia's silver sedan pulled into our driveway. She emerged in a flowing sundress that accentuated her still slender waist, her blonde hair gleaming. She headed straight not for the front door, but around the side of the house, toward the garden where Cedric worked. From behind the sheer living room curtains, I watched as she approached my husband. Their conversation was animated. She gestured, he nodded. At one point, she placed her hand on his arm, that same gesture I'd seen before, but dismissed as harmless friendliness. Now, it looked like something else entirely. She laughed, throwing her head back in that practiced way of hers. And Cedric, he smiled. A real smile, a smile I hadn't seen from him in months. My chest constricted with a pain I couldn't even name. They talked for about 20 minutes before Lilia glanced towards the house. I ducked back, my heart pounding with the absurd fear of being caught spying on my own husband. When I looked again, she was gone, her car backing out. Cedric stayed in the garden, but his movements were different now, lighter, as if their conversation had lifted a great burden. That evening, he was almost cheerful at dinner. He talked about the garden, about plans for next spring, about how excited he was to be a grandfather. He was more animated than he'd been in weeks. I studied his face, searching for guilt or deception. Instead, I saw something that might have been relief. Lilia stopped by today, I said carefully. Yes, Cedric nodded, cutting his pork chop with steady hands. Sweet girl. She's nervous about the pregnancy. Wanted some reassurance. What kind of reassurance? For just a moment, his knife stilled. Oh, you know. First-time mother worries. Whether she'll be good at it, whether the baby will be healthy. Normal concerns. But nothing about Lilia had ever struck me as normal. And I was beginning to suspect this pregnancy was the least normal thing of all. That night, as Cedric slept beside me, I made a decision. I couldn't live with this uncertainty. I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if every smile was a lie, every kiss a betrayal. I was going to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because living with lies was far worse than facing a painful reality. My investigation started in Cedric's study. Wednesday morning, after he left for his weekly doctor's appointment, I crept up the stairs to that room. It had been his sanctuary for decades, and pushing open the heavy oak door, I felt like an intruder in my own home. His study was exactly as he'd left it, papers stacked, books organized, his old leather chair perfectly positioned. It smelled of his aftershave and old books. I'd always respected his privacy, rarely entering without an invitation. Now, I wondered what that courtesy had cost me. My hands trembled as I opened his desk drawers. Pens, paper clips, business cards, nothing. But in the bottom drawer, under a stack of gardening magazines, my breath hitched. Bank statements. Not our joint account, but a separate checking account I'd never known about. They went back 6 months. I scanned the entries, large deposits, $5,000, $8,000, $12,000, appearing randomly. And withdrawals, always cash, always round numbers. $2,000, $3,500, $7,000. Where was this money coming from? And where was it going? I took photos with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to take several shots. I put everything back, but a crucial piece of the puzzle still felt missing. Then, a car in the driveway. Lilia's silver sedan. I scurried to the window. She emerged, wearing jeans and a fitted sweater, and headed not for the front door, but around the side of the house, toward the garden. This was my chance. I slipped downstairs, positioning myself at the kitchen window. Lilia was walking toward Marcus, our gardener, who was raking leaves near the old oak tree. They started talking, their body language suggesting a familiarity that surprised me. I hadn't realized they knew each other well. Their conversation was brief, but intense. Marcus kept shaking his head, while Lilia seemed to be insisting on something. At one point, she reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like an envelope. Marcus glanced around nervously, then took it, shoving it into his jacket pocket. Money. She was giving him money. But why? Cedric handled all the household expenses, including Marcus's wages. Before I could fully process this, another car pulled in. Judd's blue Honda. I watched my son get out, waving to his wife. Lilia immediately broke away from Marcus, hurrying toward Judd with a bright smile. Surprise, she called out, throwing her arms around him. I was hoping to catch you for lunch. Judd laughed, spinning her around. What are you doing here, beautiful? I wanted to check on the garden with Marcus, she said smoothly. You know how I've been wanting to learn more about plants since we found out about the baby. It sounded perfectly reasonable, perfectly innocent. But I'd seen the envelope. I'd seen Marcus's nervous glances. This wasn't about gardening. As they walked toward the house, I quickly moved to the living room, pretending to read a magazine. They came through the front door, Judd's arm around Lilia's waist, both of them glowing with happiness. Mom! Judd called out. Look who I found plotting with our gardener. Plotting? I tried to keep my voice light. Lilia laughed, that tinkling sound that always seemed just a little forced. I was asking Marcus about what flowers would be best for a baby's room. I thought maybe we could plant a little garden for our son or daughter. Our son or daughter. But the baby wasn't Judd's, was it? The baby was. That's lovely, I heard myself say. Marcus is very knowledgeable. He is, Lilia agreed, her eyes meeting mine with something that might have been a challenge. He's been so helpful. So understanding. The way she said understanding made my skin crawl. Like it held a deeper, darker meaning. They stayed for lunch. Judd chattered excitedly about baby preparations, while Lilia was quiet, watchful. Every few minutes, her gaze drifted to the window looking out on the garden, where Marcus was still working. She seemed nervous, distracted. Nothing like the confident woman who dropped her bombshell 2 nights ago. Everything okay, sweetheart? Judd asked, noticing her distraction. Just tired, she said quickly. Pregnancy hormones, you know. But studying her face, tired, wasn't what I saw. I saw calculation, worry, the expression of someone whose carefully laid plans might be unraveling. After they left, I watched Marcus work for another hour. He seemed agitated, glancing frequently toward the house, the street, his truck. Whatever Lilia had given him in that envelope, it had deeply disturbed him. That evening, Cedric came home from his appointment, distracted. He barely touched his dinner, pushing food around his plate, staring into space. Everything okay? I asked, echoing Judd's earlier question. Fine, he said automatically. Just thinking about the garden. Might need to replant the rose bed next spring. But he wasn't thinking about roses. His mind was miles away, and the lines around his eyes seemed deeper than they had that morning. The phone rang just as we were clearing dishes. Cedric answered, and I watched his face go pale. Yes, he said quietly. Yes, I understand. Tomorrow evening. I'll be there. He hung up, standing for a moment, his hand still on the phone. Who was that? I asked. No one important, he said, but his voice was strained. I need to run an errand tomorrow after dinner. An errand at night? After 43 years of marriage, my husband had never been one for mysterious evening errands. The next evening, Thursday, I watched from our bedroom window as Cedric backed out of the driveway at 7:30. He'd been quiet all day, jumpy. When I asked where he was going, he mumbled something about garden supplies. Garden centers aren't open at 7:30 p.m. 20 minutes after he left, I heard voices in our backyard. Peering through the curtains, I saw Lilia and Marcus near the garden shed, their conversation urgent, heated. Even from a distance, Marcus looked upset, gesticulating wildly, while Lilia stood with her arms crossed. I couldn't hear the words, but their body language screamed conflict, disagreement about something serious. At one point, Marcus threw his hands up in frustration, walking toward his truck. Lilia followed, grabbing his arm. They argued for another few minutes before Marcus shook his head one final time and drove away. Lilia stood alone in my backyard, her face illuminated by the security light, looking nothing like the sweet, innocent young woman my son had married. She looked calculating, desperate, dangerous. When Cedric returned an hour later, he was even more withdrawn. He went straight to his study, closing the door. I could hear him making phone calls, his voice low and urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together everything, the secret bank account, the money Lilia gave Marcus, the mysterious phone call, Cedric's evening errand, the heated argument. None of it made sense if this was just an affair. What if something much, much more complicated was happening? The next morning, Friday, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to follow Cedric when he left the house. I was going to find out where these mysterious errands were taking him. But first, I was going to search Judd's old room, the room where Lilia sometimes stayed. Because I suspected my daughter-in-law's secrets went far deeper than pregnancy and adultery. And I was right. Friday morning was gray and drizzling, perfectly matching my mood. Cedric left early for what he claimed was a hardware store run. I'd stopped believing him. After his car disappeared, I climbed to Judd's old room with a purpose I hadn't felt in days. The room had been redecorated, a pristine guest room, but Lilia had claimed it with small touches during her visits, a silk scarf, expensive lotion, magazines. I started with the dresser. Clothes, jewelry, nothing. But in the bottom drawer, under a stack of designer sweaters, my fingers found something unexpected. A manila folder, hidden like contraband. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Bank statements in Judd's name, showing transactions I knew he never made. Large cash withdrawals, dating back 8 months. $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. More money than Judd made in half a year. But there was more. Credit applications in Judd's name for cards I'd never heard him mention, loan documents for amounts that would cripple him. And at the bottom, a handwritten list in Lilia's elegant script, Northwestern Mutual, $45,000. Chase credit line, $30,000. Personal loan, M. Santos, $18,000. Emergency fund, $12,000. My hands shook as I photographed everything. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about money. Lots of it. Money my son didn't have. A sound downstairs. The front door closing. I froze. Quickly, I put everything back, crept to the window. Lilia's car. She was walking toward the house with her usual confident stride. I made it downstairs just as she entered, using the key we'd given her. "Bessie," she called out, her voice bright with fake cheer. "Hope you don't mind me letting myself in." I was hoping for a little chat. My mouth went dry. Of course. Coffee? That would be lovely. I busied myself, acutely aware of her settling at my kitchen table as if she owned the place. When I turned, she was watching me with those sharp green eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. "You seem nervous," she observed, tilting her head. "Everything all right?" "Just tired," I lied, placing her cup in front of her. "Didn't sleep well." She took a delicate sip. "I imagine you have a lot on your mind. New babies can be overwhelming, especially when they're unexpected." There was something in her tone. She looked different today, harder, less of the sweet young wife act. "Lilia," I said carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you tell Cedric about the pregnancy before you told Judd?" Her cup paused. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or calculation. Then the smile returned. "I was nervous," she said smoothly. "I wanted to make sure the family would be supportive. Cedric has always been so kind to me." "Kind," I repeated. "Very kind. Protective, even. He's been so worried about me lately." She set down her cup, leaning forward. "Has he mentioned that I've been having some difficulties?" "What kind of difficulties?" "Oh, just some stress. Financial pressures." Her eyes never left mine. "You know how it is when you're young and trying to establish yourself. Sometimes you make choices that seemed reasonable at the time, but become complicated later." I felt like I was walking through a minefield. "What kind of choices?" Lilia laughed, but there was no warmth in it. The kind that require understanding family members. The kind that require discretion. She paused, studying my face. "The kind your husband has been so helpful with." My chest tightened. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" She stood, moving to the window overlooking the garden. "Cedric is such a good man. Such a devoted father. He'd do anything to protect his family, wouldn't he? Even if it meant sacrificing his own reputation." The words hung in the air like poison. I stared at her back, the casual way she surveyed my garden like she was evaluating real estate. "What are you saying?" I whispered. She turned. The mask was completely gone. What I saw now was cold calculation, the expression of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "I'm saying that some secrets are more valuable than others, Bessie. And some people will pay dearly to keep those secrets buried. Before I could respond, voices outside caught our attention. Through the window, I saw Cedric and Marcus having an intense conversation near the tool shed. Cedric was gesturing emphatically, while Marcus kept shaking his head. Lilia's face changed, a flash of panic. "Excuse me," she said quickly, heading for the back door. "I need to speak with them." I followed her, staying close enough to hear but trying to appear casual. The conversation stopped abruptly when Lilia approached, but the tension was palpable. "Is everything all right?" Lilia asked, her voice sharp with warning. Marcus looked between Cedric and Lilia, his face troubled. "I can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "This isn't right. Judd's a good man. He doesn't deserve, Marcus." Lilia snapped. "We've discussed this." "You've discussed what?" I demanded, stepping closer. All three turned. Guilt was etched on their faces, though in different ways. Marcus looked sick with remorse. Lilia looked furious at being interrupted. And Cedric? Cedric looked like a man who'd carried an unbearable burden for far too long. "Bess," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You shouldn't be out here. In my own backyard." I kept my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "What exactly have you all discussed that I shouldn't hear?" Silence. Only the rain pattering on the leaves. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I can't do this anymore," he said, looking directly at me. "Mrs. Holloway, there are things you need to know." "Things about, that's enough." Lilia snapped. "Marcus, we had an agreement." "What agreement?" I demanded. Marcus looked at Cedric, pleading. "Tell her," he said. "She deserves to know what's really happening." Cedric closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were filled with a pain so deep it stole my breath. "Bess," he whispered. "I never wanted you to find out this way." "Find out what?" But even as I asked, pieces clicked into place, the bank statements, the mysterious errands, Lilia's veiled threats. "It's not what you think," Cedric said urgently. "It's not what she wants you to think," Lilia countered, a laugh like breaking glass. "Oh, but it is exactly what she thinks, isn't it, Bessie? Your devoted husband carrying on with his son's wife. Such a cliché." I stared at Cedric, searching his face for the truth. "I'm not having an affair," he said, his voice breaking. "Bess, I would never." He stopped, looking helplessly at Lilia. "But I can't explain without what?" I pressed. "Without destroying our son's life," Lilia finished for him, her smile triumphant. "You see, Bessie, your husband loves Judd too much to tell him the truth about his wife, about what I've been doing, about what I know." The world spun around me. "What you know about what?" Marcus stepped forward, pale but determined. "About the money," he said quietly. "About what Judd's been doing to pay his gambling debts. About the accounts she made him open, the loans she convinced him to take out." "Marcus," Lilia warned. But he continued, the words pouring out like he'd been holding them back for months. "She's been blackmailing Mr. Holloway. Threatening to destroy Judd if he doesn't cooperate with her lies. Making him pretend to be having an affair to cover up what she's really been doing." My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed a fence post for support, staring at the three faces in front of me. "Gambling debts," Cedric nodded miserably. "Online poker, sports betting. It started small, but," he spread his hands helplessly. "He owes over $100,000 to dangerous people. And she knows. She's the one who got him into it," Marcus added, his voice thick with disgust. "Introduced him to the sites, encouraged him to bet bigger. Then, when he was in too deep, she offered to help for a price." I looked at Lilia, who was watching this revelation with something akin to amusement. "What price?" "Silence," she said simply. "Cooperation. A marriage that gives me access to your family's resources." Her hand moved to her stomach. "An insurance for the future." "The baby," I whispered. "Isn't Judd's." Marcus finished quietly. "It's mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Rain continued to fall, but I barely noticed. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, the past few months, was crumbling like sand. Lilia clapped her hands slowly, mockingly. "Well," she said. "I guess the cat's out of the bag now. The question is, Bessie, what are you going to do about it?" The confrontation in the garden left me feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I just sat in my living room for hours after they all left, staring at nothing, trying to process the enormity of it all. My son, drowning in gambling debt. My husband, being blackmailed. My daughter-in-law, a calculating manipulator, pregnant with our gardener's child. And I was supposed to figure out how to handle this without destroying everyone I loved. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Cedric and I moved around each other like ghosts. We both knew everything had changed, but neither of us was ready to address it. He tried to explain a few times, approaching me with that haunted look in his eyes, but I just held up my hand. Not yet, I told him. I need to think. And I did think. Constantly. About Judd's gambling, how I'd missed the signs of his addiction. About Cedric's incredible sacrifice, playing the part of the unfaithful husband to protect our son. About Lilia's intricate web of lies. But mostly, I thought about Marcus. He'd quit the next day, of course. Left a shaky, apologetic note tucked under a flower pot by the back door. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. I hope someday you can forgive me. I wasn't angry with Marcus. If anything, I felt immense pity for him. Lilia was like a spider, and he was just another fly caught in her web. It was Tuesday of the following week. Fate, it seemed, was about to hand me the final key. I'd been avoiding going upstairs, avoiding Judd's old room where I'd found those damning documents. But that morning, I heard running water in the guest bathroom connected to that room. Lilia was here again, using our house like her personal refuge. I waited until I heard her go downstairs, then went up, using the flimsy excuse of checking for a running faucet. I just needed to do something. Needed to feel some small measure of control in this chaos. The bathroom was pristine, as always after Lilia's visits. She was meticulous about cleaning up, leaving only the faint scent of her expensive perfume. But this time, she'd left something behind. Tucked behind the toilet, probably fallen from her purse, was a long white envelope, slightly crumpled. My heart started racing even before I opened it. Some instinct screamed that this was important. Inside, a single sheet of paper with the letterhead of Gene Tech Laboratories. A DNA test result, dated just 3 days ago. My hands trembled as I read the cold, clinical language that spelled out the truth in stark black and white: paternity test results. Mother, Lilia Catherine Holloway. Child, unborn, via amniocentesis. Alleged father 1, Judd Michael Holloway, excluded. Probability of paternity, 0%. Alleged father 2, Marcus Daniel Santos, not excluded. Probability of paternity, 99.7%. I sank onto the closed toilet seat, the paper shaking in my hands. Here it was. The proof I needed. The baby wasn't Judd's. It wasn't even Cedric's, as Lilia had claimed. It was Marcus's. But why did she have a paternity test? If she was planning to pass the baby off as Judd's, why risk confirming the truth? The answer hit me in a flash of horrible clarity. Insurance. This was her insurance policy. Her proof that she could destroy our family whenever she chose. She could produce this test at any time, claim Cedric had forced her to lie, paint herself as the victim of a powerful older man. She was covering all her bases, making sure she had leverage no matter what. Footsteps on the stairs. I quickly folded the paper, slipping it into my cardigan pocket. By the time Lilia appeared in the bathroom doorway, I was calmly checking the faucet. Bessie, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were up here. Just making sure everything's turned off properly, I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. You know how these old pipes can be. She nodded, but I saw the calculation in her expression. She was wondering if I'd found anything. How are you feeling? I asked, turning to face her. With the pregnancy, I mean. Fine, she said carefully. A little tired. The doctor says everything looks normal. That's good. When's your next appointment? Next week. She paused. Judd's coming with me. He's so excited to see the ultrasound. My heart broke for my son. His joy was so pure, so genuine, and it was all built on lies. Lilia, I said softly. Isn't there anything you want to tell me? For just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw uncertainty there, maybe even a flicker of guilt. But then the cold calculation returned. Like what? The truth. We stared at each other in that small bathroom. Two women who both knew far more than we were saying. Finally, Lilia smiled. That sharp, predatory smile I was learning to hate. The truth is subjective, isn't it, Bessie? There's what happened, and there's what people believe happened. And sometimes what people believe is more important than facts. She moved past me toward the door, then paused. By the way, she said, her voice casual. I seem to have dropped something from my purse. You haven't seen anything, have you? My hand moved instinctively to my pocket, where the DNA test results crinkled softly against my fingers. No, I said steadily. Nothing at all. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. I'm sure it'll turn up, she said. Important things always do. After she left, I sat in that bathroom for a long time, holding the paper that could change everything. I could show it to Judd right now, expose Lilia's lies, free Cedric from her blackmail. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Judd would be devastated, not just about the affair that wasn't an affair, but about his gambling addiction being exposed, about the debt that had made him vulnerable. He might never recover from the shame. And Marcus, poor Marcus, as much a victim as any of us, would be dragged back into this mess, forced to face the consequences of a moment of weakness. But as I sat there, thinking about Cedric's haunted eyes and Judd's innocent excitement about becoming a father, I realized the truth had to come out. Not all at once, maybe. Not in a way that destroyed everyone. But somehow, some way, the lies had to end. That evening, I found Cedric in his study, staring blankly at papers he wasn't really reading. When I knocked on the doorframe, he looked up, his eyes utterly devoid of hope. Can we talk? I asked. He nodded, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat down and pulled the DNA test from my pocket, laying it on the polished wood between us. His face went white as he read it. Where did you? She dropped it. In the bathroom upstairs. Cedric ran his hands through his hair, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. Bess, I can explain. You don't need to explain, I said quietly. I know you're not having an affair. I know she's been blackmailing you. I know about Judd's gambling. He stared at me in amazement. You know. Marcus told me, before he left. I leaned forward. Cedric, why didn't you just come to me? Why didn't you trust me with the truth? His eyes filled with tears, the first time I'd seen my husband cry in 20 years. Because I couldn't bear to see you look at Judd the way you looked at your father, he whispered. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own father had been a gambler, too, losing our family home when I was 16. That shame, that disappointment, had colored my entire youth, and Cedric knew how deeply those scars ran. You thought I would blame him. I thought it would break your heart, he choked out. And I thought I could handle it. Pay off his debts quietly. Get him help. Make it all go away before you ever had to know. But Lilia found out. He nodded miserably. She encouraged it. Got him deeper in debt than he could ever repay. Then she offered to help if I played along with her story about the affair. Why? I asked. What did she get out of it? Time, he said simply. Time to establish herself in our family. Time to make herself indispensable. And a cover story for when the baby came and didn't look like Judd. I looked down at the DNA test again. She was going to blame you eventually, wasn't she? Yes. Make it look like I seduced her, forced her into the affair. Paint herself as the victim. He laughed bitterly. She's very clever, our Lilia. But not clever enough, I said, holding up the paper. She made a mistake. Cedric looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. What are you thinking? I stood up, smoothing down my skirt, feeling more determined than I had in weeks. I'm thinking it's time for a family dinner, I said. And this time, I'm going to be the one with the surprises. The look of relief and admiration on my husband's face made those 43 years of marriage feel absolutely worth fighting for. I spent 3 days planning that dinner with the precision of a military strategist. Every detail had to be perfect, the timing, the setting, the revelation that would finally free my family from Lilia's twisted web. Thursday evening, I called Judd. Just family, I said, making sure my voice held the warmth of a grandmother-to-be. I want to celebrate the baby properly this time. Judd was delighted. That's wonderful, Mom. Lilia's been worried you were upset about something. This will mean the world to her. If only he knew. I spent Saturday cooking all of Judd's favorite foods, pot roast, homemade bread, apple pie from my grandmother's recipe. The house filled with the comforting aromas of Sunday dinners from his childhood, from a time when life was simpler. Cedric watched me work with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. We talked late into the night, planning how to handle the revelation. He'd wanted to confront Lilia directly, but I'd convinced him that a more subtle approach would be better. She thrives on drama, I told him. She expects tears and accusations. We're going to give her something she won't know how to handle, quiet dignity and irrefutable proof. On Sunday afternoon, I set the table with my best china, the wedding set, carefully preserved for special occasions. The irony wasn't lost on me, using these symbols of marital commitment to expose the ultimate betrayal of those very vows. Lilia arrived, wearing a flowing dress that emphasized her pregnancy, her hand resting protectively on her still small bump. She looked radiant, glowing with the satisfaction of a woman who believed she held all the power. "Bessie," she exclaimed, kissing my cheek with apparent affection. "Everything smells wonderful. You've gone to so much trouble." "No trouble at all," I said smoothly. "Family is worth every effort." Judd beamed, pulling out his wife's chair with that gallant attention he'd learned from his father. "Isn't Mom amazing? She could open her own restaurant." "Absolutely," Lilia agreed, but her eyes were watchful, studying my face for any hint of the tension that had marked our recent interactions. She was clearly puzzled by my apparent good mood, uncertain whether to be relieved or suspicious. We made small talk through the appetizers. Lilia described her latest pregnancy symptoms, Judd shared news from work, Cedric asked gentle questions about the baby's due date. To anyone watching, we looked like a perfectly normal family celebrating new life. But I was watching Lilia carefully, noting how she deflected certain questions, how her hand moved to her stomach whenever the conversation turned to specifics about the pregnancy. She was performing the role of expectant mother, but there was something calculated about it, like she was remembering lines from a script. "You know," I said casually as I served the main course. "I've been thinking about family history lately. About genetics." Lilia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Genetics? It's fascinating how traits get passed down through generations. Eye color, hair texture, facial features." I smiled at Judd. "You have your father's eyes, but my stubborn chin." Judd laughed. "Thanks for that, Mom. I wonder what the baby will look like," I continued, my voice conversational. "Will he have Judd's dark hair, or your blonde, Lilia? Will he be tall like the Holloway men, or petite like you?" "It's impossible to predict," Lilia said carefully. "Genetics can be surprising." "Oh, but modern science is so advanced now," I said, taking a sip of wine. "They can tell you so much about a baby, even before birth. DNA testing. Paternity confirmation. It's really quite remarkable." The word paternity hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Lilia went very still, her face carefully blank. Cedric set down his fork, recognizing we'd reached the crucial moment. "DNA testing?" Judd asked, oblivious to the tension crackling around him. "You mean like those ancestry kits?" "Among other things," I said. "They can also determine parentage with almost perfect accuracy. Very useful when there are questions about family relationships." Lilia's breathing had become shallow, but she maintained her composure. "What an odd topic for dinner conversation, isn't it?" I tilted my head. "I think it's quite relevant, actually." I stood up, walking to the sideboard where I'd placed a manila envelope before dinner. My hands were steady as I returned to the table, though my heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. "Lilia, dear," I said, my voice gentle but implacable. "I believe you dropped something in my bathroom last week." Her face went white as I placed the DNA test results in front of her. The paper seemed to glow under the chandelier light, its clinical language spelling out the truth in stark black and white. Judd frowned, reaching for the document. "What is this?" "Don't," Lilia whispered. But it was too late. I watched my son's face as he read, saw confusion give way to understanding, then to utter devastation. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of shattered illusions. "I don't understand," Judd said finally, his voice barely audible. "Marcus Santos." "Who is Marcus Santos?" "Our former gardener," Cedric said quietly. Judd looked up at his wife, his eyes pleading for an explanation that would make this nightmare make sense. "Lilia." She sat frozen, trapped between denial and confession, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "The baby isn't your son," I said gently. "It never was." What followed was the most painful hour of my life. Judd's face crumpled as the truth sank in. Not just about the baby, but about everything. The gambling debts that had made him vulnerable. The manipulation that had trapped him in Lilia's web. The way his shame about his addiction had been used against him. Lilia tried to salvage the situation, spinning a desperate story about being forced into the affair, about Cedric taking advantage of her vulnerability. But the lies sounded hollow now, transparent in the face of documented proof. "You planned this," Judd said slowly, the pieces clicking together in his mind. "You knew about my gambling problem. You encouraged it." "I was trying to help you," Lilia protested. "By getting me deeper in debt. By using my shame to blackmail my father into playing along with your lies." She had no answer for that. "And Marcus?" Judd's voice broke on the name. Did you seduce him, too? Was he just another tool in your game? It wasn't supposed to happen, Lilia whispered. It just. I was lonely and he was kind. So you destroyed his life, too. Cedric spoke up then, his voice heavy with the weight of months of silence. Son, I want you to know that I never touched her. I let you believe I was having an affair because I couldn't bear to see you face the consequences of the gambling. I thought I could protect you. Judd looked at his father, his eyes full of pain and gratitude. Dad, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. You're my son. But I should have trusted your mother with the truth. Should have trusted you to be stronger than your mistakes. The cleanup was swift and decisive. Lilia packed her things that very evening, her suitcases stacked by the front door like a fortress of failure. She had nowhere to go, no family who would take her in, no friends who weren't connected to the lies she'd told. What about the baby? She asked desperately as Judd loaded her belongings into her car. You can't just abandon your grandchild. The baby will be fine, I said calmly. I've already called Marcus's sister in Phoenix. She's willing to take you in until the birth, help you get on your feet. Lilia stared at me in amazement. You arranged for me to go to Phoenix. I arranged for you to have a chance to start over, I corrected. To raise your child honestly, without lies or manipulation. What you do with that chance is up to you. As her car disappeared down our street, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for the pain that had been caused, an immense relief that the lies were finally over. 6 months later, a photo arrived in the mail. A baby boy with dark hair and Marcus's gentle eyes. On the back, in Lilia's handwriting, his name is David. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Judd had started going to Gamblers Anonymous, facing his addiction with the same determination he brought to everything else in his life. Cedric and I were closer than we had been in years, our marriage strengthened by the truth we had finally shared. And our real grandchild, the one born to parents who loved each other honestly, arrived 8 months after that terrible dinner. A beautiful girl with Judd's dark eyes and his new wife, Sarah's, infectious laugh. Sometimes the greatest victories are the quietest ones. Not the dramatic confrontations or public revelations, but the simple act of choosing truth over lies, forgiveness over revenge, and love over the fear of being hurt. I learned that at 65, it's never too late to fight for your family. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't anger or accusation, but the quiet dignity of a woman who knows her own worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. In the end, I didn't destroy Lilia. I simply removed her power to destroy us. And that, my friends, made all the difference.